because now dorm 3 will be the Waterford cabin. And no young person's going to want to stay in 1 and 2 because 3 is going to have granite countertops and memory foam mattresses. Because the Waterford Church of Christ, they go above and beyond the call of duty. So, thank you. I'm kidding. We aren't going to put memory foam mattresses. They're kids. They can sleep on sleeping bags. Come on. But we'll do it upright. We'll do it upright. We are in Exodus chapter 20 and verse 15 tonight with the 8th commandment. And I look back over our last several lessons and I realized that the last 2 lessons consisted of 7 words in the text. And I preached 30 minutes per week. I don't know how many minutes that is per word, but it's a lot. Because the first two lessons ago, we talked about you shall not murder. 30 minutes. Last time it was you shall not commit adultery. 30 minutes. And so I thought, wow, I gotta shorten this up for everybody because these are short verses. So tonight what I want to do is we're just going to try to dive in and bring out exactly what God wants us to know from this short verse, and then I'll sit down and we'll be done. How's that? Does that sound good, everybody? Okay. Exodus chapter 20, verse 15. You shall not steal. And what that basically means is God doesn't want us to take something that's not ours. Did I get it done? Sorry, I'm just working on my popularity. You shall not steal. You know, it is a simple concept, isn't it? Don't steal. Don't take what's not yours. But there is, sorry, if you were hoping for something that short, sorry to disappoint. Because believe it or not, there is indeed a deeper principle than just the idea of not taking what is literally not ours. Because these last 5 of the 10 commandments are grouped together in regard to our relationship to other people. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife or your neighbor's possession. And all of these have to do with respecting the personhood of others. That's what they're about. And believe it or not, this text is going to be a little counterintuitive. The real message here is going to be a little counterintuitive from what our mamas always taught us, and even what we try to teach our children in a sense. Because we always try to tell our kids, you are not what you drive, right? When your kids are 16 and everybody else gets a Volvo and they get a Ford, and they don't like it, you tell them you're not what you drive. Or how about, you ever had this conversation with your little girls? You're not what you wear. You're not what kind of handbag, what brand of handbag you own. Fellas, you're not what brand of sneakers you run around school in. Do we tell that to our children, right? And understandably, we're right. A human being is not defined by what possessions they have. Or are they? Or are they? Think about it. Is that not in some way what this commandment is all about? Has anyone ever had your home broken into? Have you? It's scary, isn't it? Is it hard to get over? It is. How about your car? One night, years ago, when Lenore and I were dating before we got married, we lived in Portland, Oregon, went to Columbia Christian College together. And we loved to go. We've always been city people. We've been to Detroit 5 times since she's been here. I mean, we like going into the city. We like it. But there's no subway systems here. But there, they have one. So we would park our car across from the school in the subway lot, and we'd get on the train and we'd ride it into town. One night we came back about, 1 in the morning, and our car window was broken, and there wasn't anything in there to steal. I don't even know why they did that. I think they maybe took my cowboy. No, they cut it up, didn't they? They stole maybe some little meaning. They stole the radio. That's what it was. I remember now. They stole the radio back when there were radios that were stealable. Is that a word, stealable? I don't know. But they stole a radio, and I had a felt cowboy hat When y'all see our wedding picture, you'll understand how important that was to me. Mr. Kerry got married in a cowboy hat and a big old belt buckle and boots. Okay? That was me in the day. And I won't talk about my waist size back then either, but I had a beautiful felt cowboy hat, and they just took it, just for plain meanness sake, just meanness sake, they took and they just cut with a knife that cowboy hat and left it in my car. Well, I had to buy about a $50 new window and, got me a new cowboy hat. It wasn't the end of the world. But it was extremely disheartening. And it made me feel insecure. You had your house broken into, it makes you feel insecure, doesn't it? Why is that? Okay, it's my hat. Big deal. I got another one. It's the car. Big deal. If they break into your house, most of the things they take are replaceable, right? If they take your television, is that replaceable? It's replaceable. So why does it bother us? Because in some way, possessions are both in a good way and a bad way a transference of personhood. They are. Think about some of your possessions in your life. Are some more important to you than others? Are there some possessions that are extremely intimate to you? Some of the possessions in my life I can't imagine losing are a bookmark that's worth more than my car. I told you about that today. Or a guitar that my grandpa gave me that I can't even play because it needs a new fretboard, but it doesn't matter. That's the only thing my grandpa had to give. And it means the world to me. Some of the things that are unique to us, the style that we have, the person, whether we want it to or not. And I understand what we're trying to impress upon our children to say you're not what you drive. In other words, it's not you're not of a lower class of human being because you can't afford what other people can afford or because you don't want to show off as other people may show off. And that's a good message to communicate. But whether we admit it or not, our personhood is connected with possessions in a material world. It is, right? There are some things that could be taken from you that would take part of you with them. Because you impress some of yourself upon those possessions. And when we look in Scripture, we realize that God even understands this. Possessions are an extension of the person. Otherwise, why would the year of Jubilee have been designed the way it was in the Old Testament? You know what the year of Jubilee is, right? The year of Jubilee came around periodically, and it was a time when slaves would be returned to their freedom. And that's definitely about personhood. But that wasn't the only thing that happened at the year of Jubilee. All family lands and all family possessions were to be returned. Even if they had been sold off, even if they had been mortgaged, even if they had been lost in business propositions, regardless of the circumstances, all family possessions went back to their original family owners. Why? Why couldn't you just receive some new land? Because in some sense, even God understood that in a material world, now we're going to leave all this world behind, and we don't lay up our treasures on this earth because we have an investment in a place which will last, and this is temporary. But temporary or not, in some way, personhood can be tied to possessions. Whether we want it that way or not, whether it's ideal or not, that is the reality of living in this world. It is. Our possessions become an extension of us, and it even comes through in our language. Anybody in a car wreck recently? Nobody? Well, that's good. Y'all are good drivers. Lenora, what's it like to be in a car wreck? She's an expert on this. Y'all know she loves me, don't you? You shouldn't sit up front. This is just, you're done. Back in Arkansas, she sat like way back on the side in the middle. If you've ever been in a car wreck, if somebody bumps you from behind, you get out, and if you're upset, what do you say? You say, you hit me. What? No, they didn't hit you. What'd they hit? They hit your car. So why do we say that? Because in that moment, whether we realize it or not, that possession, that big hunk of steel, is an extension of who we are. Because it's ours. And as we talked about last week when we were talking about adultery, that's the biggest problem there as well. You see, because there's a possessiveness of husband and wife. Not in an unscriptural way, not in a I control you as you're my slave or you're my possession in that sense, but in a healthy way. God gave us to one another as a possession. And that's why it's such a breach of trust and such a deep-rooted hurt. And in a lesser way, material things get imbued with some of our personhood. Therefore, when we take the possessions of other people, we hurt those people. We hurt them. We wound their person. Isn't any wonder that the 8th commandment is a follow-up to the 6th and the 7th? You shall not murder. You need to look out for the other person. You shall not hurt their personhood. You shall not commit adultery. You need to look out for the other person and for their spouse. And you shall not hurt their personhood. You shall not steal. You shall not hurt their personhood. You see, all of them speak to the importance of other people. And that is why when you give a gift to someone, it's important. You know, it's just stuff. But when you give something to someone that's yours, you're giving gifts. Have you ever thought about why is Christmas such a meaningful event? I don't know if it is in your family, but it is in our family. And it's not about how much something costs, is it? It's about its meaning. Some of the most precious things are because they were given by another person and precious to that other person. Rianne gave me when she was 5 a Tweety Bird pen that was yellow. She bought it at the dollar store. But every day when I left to go to the office, she'd ask me, Daddy, you have your pen? You have your Tweety Bird pen? And I'd have to pull it out of my pocket. This gaudy yellow pen with a Tweety Bird on the top. Yes, baby, I have my pen. I'm supposed to be a professional and engender the respect of people, and I'm going around town with this pen in my pocket. But she loved it, and therefore I loved it. It was lost somewhere along the way, but when she was married last year, right before I walked her down the aisle, she pulled out a bag, and I opened it up, and it was a silver cross Tweety Bird pen. I don't even know where she got it. When we give a gift, it's just a possession. But it's more than that. It's a possession that has been imbued with another's personhood. That's why a gift is a beautiful thing. And to steal is an evil thing. It's not because of the stuff. It's because people are the only thing that matter in this world. And stuff is connected to people. So we look and we consider what this means. And it tells us that honesty is supposed to be more than just a policy. You know, Benjamin Franklin coined that phrase. Honesty is the best policy. But what about when dishonesty proves to be a better one? And it does sometimes. If you're just thinking about what's good for you, there are times when dishonesty is a better policy than honesty, just from a sheerly self-absorbed circumstance. Isn't it true? So honesty is more than just a policy, more than just something that is generally good for me. No, it's about our own personal character. An honest person, oh, how we need this today. I told you that I've never really had a real job. I think I said something about that. I've been preaching since I was 20 years old, full time. So the only real jobs I had was I worked at Orange Julius. Yes, laugh it up. In high school and made Julius's until they made me wear an elf hat at Christmas, and it was too much. I did have even some self-respect then. So I went on to another job. I worked at a gas station. And then finally, after I met Lenora, had to pay off all the credit card debt she brought into the marriage. So we went on. I worked at Sears, selling toolboxes. And that's the last real job I had. But I learned something interesting at Sears. I was working with a crew of guys who thought it was the funniest thing in the world that I was going to go to preaching school. And they would tease me about, well, you're going off and the priest, but how are you getting married if you're going to be a priest? You know, they'd go on and on about stuff like this, and they'd tease me, and I'd just smile and take the ribbon. And, of course, every night after work, they'd be, well, we're going down to the bar. You want to come? Oh, we forgot. They didn't forget. It was just their little version of persecution. Well, every night when my shift was over, and when I'd close by myself, it was the way that the store was laid out. There were the offices, and you go down one way and you turn right, and there was the tool department. And in between the two, on the corner, you'd go through big double doors into the stock room. And there was a door from the office to the stock room and a door from my department to the stock room, and it was just a shorter distance than walking through the store. So every night I'd close up my register, and in the tool department at a Sears store, back when people used to shop at Sears, there was quite a bit of money in that drawer every night, thousands of dollars, and I'd fill up my, I'd reconcile it all and fill up my bag and go back through the stock room into the office, turn in my bag, say goodnight, and head home. And it was interesting because then Christmas time came around. And that's the very busiest time. So they put two of us closing at night instead of one. And now I'm with one of the other guys, and he's ribbing me and teasing me the whole time about, hey, after work tonight, we're going to, oh, I forgot, preacher, man. And I just took it and smiled. And then we get ready to close. He closes his register. I close my register. And I fill up my bag, reconcile it all, get ready to walk through the storeroom. And he says, what are you doing? Freaks out. And I said, well, I'm going to take my money back to the office. He said, you can't go through the stockroom. He said, there's no cameras in the stockroom. That's instant termination. You'll be fired just like that. And I didn't want to tell him, I've been doing this every night for 6 months. So I went through the store, and the next day I got there early and went into my boss's office. And I shut the door and I said, boss, I'm worried here. I didn't know. I didn't know. And somebody told me. He said, oh. Now what was funny about this is the fellow I was closing with and the boss, they were big buddies. They went out night after work. But when I told him about my concern, he said, oh yeah. He said, well, when you're closing with him, you just walk through the store like he said. When you're closing by yourself, don't worry about it. You can go through the stockroom. Don't worry about it. And I said, well, what did he say about me getting fired? He said, oh, that's technically our policy. He said, there's no cameras in the stockroom, and the first 2 or 3 times you did it, we double counted your bag. But your bag was never off. He said, the guy who was closing with you's bag is off all the time. As are almost every employee in this store. He said, let me show you something. We stood up, we walked back, he took me into the forbidden zone. That's the security room that regular employees were never allowed in. And he said, look at all the cameras. You know where they were all pointed? At the cash registers. I said, what about shoplifters? He said, shoplifters are 1/10 of our loss. 90% of our loss are the employees. About a month later, he pulled me in his office again. He teased me every day, by the way, too. And he said, you have an interest in management at Sears if you give up this preacher thing? And I said, I didn't think you liked me. He said, I know you're honest. And I said, I'll be a preacher, thank you. But do you understand what a rare commodity real honesty is? To really live by those words, thou shalt not steal, means that you live by a personal policy of integrity. that does the right thing even in the small things, that chooses to not go back for seconds when they say one helping only. You know, the little things. That chooses to go back up and pay for the other drink rather than all 7 of you sharing one. You know? A person who says honesty is more than just a policy. Honesty will be a part of the fabric of my very character. It is a bedrock virtue of those who would desire to be godly. In Ephesians chapter 4, verse 28, Ephesians 4:28, it says, "Let him who stole steal no longer, but rather let him labor, working with his hands for what is good, that he may have something to give him who has need." We live in a culture where the lines between honesty and dishonesty are sometimes hard to figure out. Would you agree with that? I mean, sometimes it's hard to know, is this really an action that's of integrity or is it not? Is this something there's so many, because you get times where I heard on the radio just yesterday, I was driving and I hear someone comes on and talks about bankruptcy. And indeed, there are times when people, I've known folks who, because of medical bills or things out of their control, they want to do the best they can to pay their bills and it gets out of hand. But this person was talking about if you owe the IRS, if you owe your creditors, let us just get you out of it. And we won't make you pay 1 more cent than you deserve. The way I understand debt is if I owe something and I chose to charge it, then that's what I deserve to pay. Now there may be a situation where you didn't know, and there comes a time where you have to get out of some debts because circumstances change. That's fine. But that doesn't mean you don't deserve to pay it. It just means you're asking for mercy. But yet, we have ads that say, you shouldn't pay 1 more dime than you deserve to. No, if you use the card, then you deserve to pay it all. Well, but that interest rate is exorbitant. Did you read the print? Did you know what 18% was when you got the card? I'm not trying to be unkind. I'm just trying to be real. Honesty. And there may come a time when you have to ask for mercy. There's no shame in asking for mercy when it's necessary. But let's never be a people as the people of God who shirk responsibility, even if we have to ask for help with that responsibility. A person of integrity embraces it. Embraces it. And that brings us to the instance that was read for us from Luke 19 about Zacchaeus, where we realize that honesty is the truest form of human existence. And we won't go back through it. It was read for us well tonight. And you know the story. Zacchaeus is a tax collector. He wants to see Christ, but he's basically shunned by his fellow Hebrews. Most tax collectors they were seen as collaborators with Rome for their own selfish ends. And that's not far from the truth. The way tax collectors worked in the first century is because the Roman Empire was made up of a bunch of smaller governorships. That's why you see Judea has its own king. Herod is the king. He's not really the king. He's kind of a puppet king, allowed to have some power, but Caesar is king. But in that particular governmental system where the Romans tried to allow each individual place to keep their own culture, their own religion, they thought it would squell uprising. They still had to collect their taxes. So rather than sending in Romans and foreigners to collect taxes, they put the tax collecting up for bid. And so tax collectors knew the rate that had to be collected for Rome, and they were allowed to set their own rate above and beyond that. Which meant that depending on how dishonest the tax collector was, and he carried all the weight of the government now, a tax collector could find all sorts of different taxes. There are stories told in first century writings, extra biblical, historical first century writings of people being pulled over by a tax collector, and he taxed their cart, and he taxed each horse on the cart, and he taxed each bridle on the cart, and he taxed each wheel of the cart, and he taxed each spoke of the cart, and he taxed both hubs of those spokes on the cart. And then he started on taxing every item within the cart. Why did they hate tax collectors? Maybe some of you like paying taxes. I don't know. But in Arkansas and Alabama, we don't like paying taxes. That's just kind of being human, right? Well, imagine if you felt like your own countrymen, for their own personal gain, were going the extra mile. Because the tax collector had discretion. And for one to be like Zacchaeus and be as despised as he appears to be, and to be as wealthy as he appears to be, it is a safe assumption that he's been very good at his job. And what happens here? He wants to see Jesus. He's missing something, as sinful people do. Climbs up in the tree. Jesus says, I'm going to your house. And you know how it unfolds. He's changed by Christ. Christ stands up for him, even to those who would rebuke Jesus for being with him. And Zacchaeus says, anyone I have wronged, I will pay him back even more. You see, he wants to be different. He wants to change. He wants his life to be defined by honesty rather than dishonesty. In essence, he wants to be able to go to sleep at night and live with the man he sees in the mirror. And that begins with being a person of whom honesty is a part of our essential character. Finally, what we need to realize in regard to the idea of being an honest person, not taking what's another's, is we need to be a people who realize we have no need to ever take from anyone because we're children of the King. In Matthew chapter 6, Jesus will go on at length. For over 12 verses, he'll talk about the provision of God. Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. Consider the birds of the air. If God does not take care, if God takes care of them, then how much more is he going to take care of you? I don't know that there could be more of an expression of distrust in God than thinking I've got to take something from somebody else. What prince or princess would ever stoop to stealing? They don't do that. It's beneath them. It's beneath them. We are children of the King. To cheat on our taxes, to steal, to shoplift, to take something which is rightfully someone else's, to pilfer. Princes and princesses don't do that. They're above that because of who their Father is. On this and so many subjects, we need to realize who we are. And as we consider all of these last 5 of the 10 Commandments, we realize that they're all about the value of other people. We would never murder because people's lives are too valuable to us, but especially to God. We wouldn't commit adultery because people's lives are too valuable, and we wouldn't steal because it would hurt people's personhood. And people are too valuable. Tonight, we went longer than the 4 words would have dictated. But I hope that we could take this and apply it in our lives and be a people who are identified by a character of honesty. If you're subject to an invitation tonight, if we can help you, encourage you in any way, as we gather here on the Sunday Night Live, come right now as we stand and as we sing.